So the next step is stitching my facing and my lining to each other, and I'll do this 2 times. So my 2 shells are attached and I've put those aside. Now I'm joining the facing and the shell. So again, we are stitching those 18 long inch sides together, okay? It doesn't matter if your tracing is on the front or the back, it'll all be in the seam allowance because we did make a production pattern. So for this, it might be helpful to pin the pieces together. So I have some pins here. And when we are pinning a seam, you want to make sure everything is lined up absolutely perfectly to start with. And then you'll insert your pins perpendicular. I see a lot of people pin vertically, but there's a reason why it's better to pin perpendicular. When you pin vertically, you're really going into like the direction of the seam, right? So the pin slides in and out as you're sewing like this. When you pin perpendicular to the seam, you are kind of catching that seam in the cross direction. So as we move vertically, it doesn't budge. It's also easier to pull your pins out as we stitch along. So you can sew with as many pins as you need. I don't typically use them. If I have a garment with a lot of fullness, then I definitely do. But I'll demo sewing with pins for this seam. It's also important not to sew over your pins. That can dull the feed dogs on your machine. And so the feed dogs are that kind of grip-like texture underneath the presser foot. The feed dogs promote the fabric that you're sewing to move back, and so it kind of perfects the tension of your sewing. If they get ground down by tension either from the presser foot hitting them when you are winding a bobbin, so it's really important to raise your presser foot then, or by running over pins, they're extremely difficult to replace, and it'll really affect the overall tension of your sewing and kind of compromise everything that you make. So be mindful to pull those out as long as possible when you're sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a straight stitch, stitching and back stitching at the begin and end of my seam. So as you approach the pin, you can stop, take it out, and then continue. So my facing is attached. I'll open it up. It should look like this. So this is definitely my lining. It's smaller than the shell, and my facing. But now that they're attached, they should be the exact same height as the shell. So I'll go ahead and repeat that process. With my next lining and facing piece. Okay, so you can see how those notches really help when you're sewing. They tell you exactly where that stitch line needs to end, right? Okay, so I'll open these up. My next step is to press them. So I'm going to press everything up. My facing gets pressed, so the seam should be up. but my seam allowance will also be up towards the facing. So everything is going up in the direction of the facing.